Hi, everyone. It's Sarah Barker with the Connect Our Elders Empowering Aging podcast. Before we get started with my guest today, Anthony Nitz, I want to make sure that I express gratitude to our sponsor for these Empowering Aging podcasts, Retirement Genius, all things alternative funding solutions to pay for care. Anthony, thank you so much for being my guest today. For the audience, Anthony is the probate agent. And before we move into learning about exactly what he does, and I'm going to ask him some questions, I would like for him to share with you a bit about his background and how he has found himself doing this work.
Well, first of all, Sarah, you tell me, thank me. I thank you because of this podcast that you're doing, helping us make sure that we're taking care of our elders and things like that. Just getting the word out in this industry to make sure that they're cared for, which is directly in line with the passion that I have in what I do, making sure that our elders are taken care of. So thank you.
Thank you.
But, so I mean, if we want to go back to how I got into working with probate and trust sales and that thing, we'd have to rewind the clock all the way back to 1997. This little whippersnapper got into real estate. I'm not such a whippersnapper no more. But I got into real estate in 97. And that was actually after working in the title insurance space and the escrow space and the mortgage space. So I had a good background in real estate. And what I knew was I wanted to get into a specific niche or some specialty because we know, the specialties are always more sought after and things like that. So I was looking around and this thing landed on my desk. It said, learn about probate. And I'm like, sounds like a medical condition, right? But that's not what it was. And so I said, okay, let me go learn about probate. I went to this class. I learned about what probate was, and I realized, oh my gosh, this is a perfect little niche for me to get into because I've always had an affinity for, law, legal stuff, contracts, that sort of stuff. And so I said, okay, what's that? Yeah. So I dove into it, but more importantly, what I quickly realized after I started that process of really diving into it, it's like, oh my gosh, there are so many people out there who are in a situation where they're being targeted and they need help. And that's my role. That's my job, is to take, as I see it now, is to take care of these individuals so that.
And when you say being targeted, could you share a bit more, expound on that? How are people being targeted?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's two different things. There's actually three aspects of this that we'll talk about. There's probate, there's trust sales, and then there's just the family needs to sell the family home. Okay. And when I say targeted, it's specifically in probate. If you have your property, if you go and you file for probate and you begin that process with an attorney because mom and dad has passed, right? You're now on a list. In most states, that list is public record. And so so every opportunity seeker goes out there and they recognize that you as a family member selling that probate property is desperate, might be, or probably desperate to get that home sold because of a few things. Number one, the house is in disrepair, right? It's outdated. Even if it's not in disrepair or outdated, there's expenses to maintain the house during the sales process. So can you afford to make the mortgage payment, pay the taxes, keep the utilities on, do general maintenance and whatnot, keep the home secure for the next 3 to 6 months while the house is marketed, right? So they see this as you being desperate. And they come to you, and when I say they, I'm talking primarily today about cash investors. Okay. They'll come to you and they'll say, hey, we're going to make you an offer, and you're lucky that we're giving you this offer, and you should really take it because what a hassle, right? What a hassle to be able to continue to market this property. So you're being targeted. And the same thing goes with trust sales. Trusts are not as prevalent because they're not public record generally. But there's statistics that tell us that right now, about 70 to 75%, depending on which report or magazine you read or whatever, says that 75% of all home sellers all, not just probate, trust, and all that, all home sellers are first seeking out a cash offer.
Okay.
So they're going to an ad and they're saying, give me a cash offer, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we narrow that down to just people in probate, trust, and that sort of thing, it's more like 90% of them. Okay.
Okay.
And so now those people come along and they go, they get that request for that cash offer. They're going to show up at your door. They're going to just grind you until you
Mm-hmm.
tell
So I
them
knew
at
about
the lowest
probate being public, but it never crossed my mind that people could be targeted for this through that.
Oh yeah.
So
Oh,
thank
yeah.
you for teaching me that today. So you've said many times that you get so sad when you see someone sell a family home, right, to a cash buyer without professional help. And that's what we're talking about, is how they're targeted because of it. And there's this sense of desperation. They're coming in with a cash offer. But why is it that they should be working with a professional?
Well, okay, if you look at the ads for cash offers, okay, and before I go into this, I want to say I have nothing against cash investors. That's their business model. It's what they do. That's their job. If you had a stock investor and that stock investor, what are their job? Buy low, sell high, right? Any
Mm-hmm.
investor. If a stock investor managed somehow to go buy 1,000 shares of Apple stock today for $15, you go, wow, how shrewd. What a great, business person, right? But if, with cash investors, they're doing the same thing. The difference is, in my book, the difference is that you have an individual, it's a family member, or you have a senior who needs to sell a house, and they go, and they go in there and they're taking advantage of the situation and taking that money away from them, not making an investment to, just for their future. It is for their future, but taking away from that senior or that family member. So it makes me sad when they don't have a professional, because if you look at the ads for cash offers, almost every single ad, they try to create the common enemy of the real estate agent. Okay.
Okay.
And they say, we'll buy your house. You don't have to fix it up. Well, what do a lot of real estate agents say? They say, well, it'd be better if you fixed it up. Okay. You don't have to do any repairs. You don't have to, we'll close quickly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, a real estate agent, you might sit on the market for a few months. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking if you did a traditional sale. And then the other thing is, and you don't have to pay any stinking real estate commissions. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the family member's mind, they're going, that makes sense. I know those real estate commissions are pretty hefty, but when you take the calculations that a typical investor uses to purchase your home, it way exceeds what you would pay a real estate professional to stand in that path for you and take the fire and do the
Okay.
negotiations. Do you know what I'm saying?
So it sounds like to me, if I were to just break it down in the simplest, is what you're saying that yes, it may take longer, right? To not take that cash offer and, go through the process of working with a professional such as yourself, but you really will get more, right? You're going to get more money at the sale versus taking the cash offer.
The answer to that is yes, but not necessarily, because the key is finding the right real estate professional. Okay. So like me, I deal with homes that are in, disrepair. They have grandma's orange shag carpet and 70 swag lamps, and we sell them really, really fast because we know how to deal with all the cash buyers. We know the right cash buyers, and we know how to maximize that result if that's what they want to do. Right. Because
Okay.
again, the family member stressed out. I got to pay for all this stuff. I got mortgage payments. I can't do that. So finding the right one. And I'll tell you, this is important because if somebody's listening to this and they go, okay, yeah, you're right, Anthony. Yeah, we do need to have a real estate professional. And what do they do? They go look up, who's selling the most homes in the area, right? It's what they should do. probably, if they're going to do that research, but they may not even be necessarily the right person. For example, we have, there's real estate agents all around me. That specialize in luxury homes, and they sell a lot of luxury homes.
Hmm.
However, if you come to them and you've got, the old outdated house, that doesn't quite fit in their style, right?
Right.
So then they're in their mind, whether they admit it or not, and they'll never admit it, but whether they admit it or not, they're going, I got to get this thing off my books. This doesn't fit my image. And
Hmm.
so I need to, dump this place. You know
Okay,
what I'm
so
saying?
this isn't like they can still take that cash buyer, as you're saying, but what you're really doing is operating as this advisor, this navigator through the process for them.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've said in the past, right, that to watch out for that smile.
Uh-huh.
What exactly does that mean to watch out for that
Oh,
smile?
yeah. So, uh, so as somebody who deals and works in this space, I'm also part of a bunch of different investor networks, right? Where, because I want to keep on top of what they're talking about and what they're doing. And I have never met an investor who is going out there to, I'm going to say what it is, and from my perspective and from the family member's perspective, stealing your equity,
Mm,
who isn't the most friendly, nice. Can I bring
charismatic.
you a coffee? Let's hang out and chat. We're going to be pals, right?
Mhm.
Because if you think about it, you're never, ever, ever going to give away something to somebody who's mean and grumpy and just here's what it is, take the offer or not. And so a great example of this is on one of the investor networks, and I was just reading through one of the threads, and this one guy was bragging about how he managed to get a $50,000 reduction on the price from this little old lady because he sat there and he did her dishes for her while he was talking to her,
That just
right?
doesn't. Mm, mm.
I mean, it's crazy, right?
Yeah.
And they'll be so friendly. And that's why I say, watch out for that smile. You're not going to buy from somebody who's mean. I mean, you're not going to give stuff to somebody who's mean, but you're going to give away the farm to somebody who's really nice. And they know this. They know this. And there's another thing that they know too is that in most cases, you're going to call one person, one, and they're going to come out and they're going to give you the story and they're going to go, gosh, do you see how much work needs to be done? Do you see all the stuff? And they kind of give you that little bit of shame. It's okay. You shouldn't feel bad about letting your house be in this condition, right?
Hmm.
And and you're lucky that I'm here because
But
I'm
here's
gonna.
the reality, right? Like if you think about the demographic that we're talking about,
Mhm.
for various reasons, it becomes difficult to do the upkeep in the home. But
Yeah.
also, I guess they're just doing their profession, this example that you're sharing, but that $50,000 could be very helpful when it comes to, paying for care needs, or maybe there's a move into an assisted living community or memory care. And, those, the senior care options, whether it's caregiving, if they're right sizing or moving into a community, are not cheap.
What a difference in quality of life would
Yeah.
somebody have with just an extra $50,000? And I have examples where there's a difference of $250,000
Oh my God.
difference that investor would have taken that house from that person had we not stepped in. It's insane. It's crazy, and this is why it makes me so sad. It makes me a little furious. But like I said, I don't begrudge the investor. That's their business model. But home sellers, family members, attorneys, industry professionals, they don't have to let this happen.
So how are people finding you in these situations, Anthony?
Well, mostly it's through word of mouth, social media, online, just doing research. I've got a YouTube channel that we put out a lot of content on that addresses some of the issues, not all the issues,
Mhm.
because everybody's situation is, a little bit unique. Uh,
Mhm.
but but that's one way that they'll find us is through those channels.
Okay, and so I believe you're in Orange County,
I
correct?
am, yeah, yeah.
So where can you help people? Just in Orange County, Southern California, all over?
Well, so like I said, back in 1997, I got I started this thing. So I've been doing it for a little while, and as a result, we've built up a network, a great network of real estate professionals
Mhm.
nationwide.
Oh,
Okay,
great.
who that uh, a couple of things. If you were to contact me and say, "Hey, do you know somebody in my location?" We're actually going to go through the process of vetting those people for you
Mhm.
and finding out, is that actually the right person to do the job? And more times than not, it's not the right person. Okay, and so we find that right person for you. So we'll do that, and most of the time they're within our own our own network.
People that are
Same,
vetted, that you trust already.
yeah,
These aren't just
mhm.
random people you're finding. So that's really great to know that you can provide those resources nationally.
Absolutely, but also with cash buyers too. So
Okay.
if you're in a situation where you're going, hey, you know what, we need to get this thing moved. We need to sell it ASAP. We're okay with taking a lower price and taking a cash offer, but we still want the best cash
Right.
offer we can
It
get.
doesn't have to be the lowest.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it doesn't have to be the lowest. And part of the trick to that for us is that we get a bunch of cash buyers offering on your house, and then we throw them all in the ring together and let them duke it out.
So it sounds as though you are facilitating the negotiations as
Yeah,
well.
yes, we help with that. It depends on a case by case basis, whether it's us or whether it's a local real estate professional in the area.
Okay.
Just because of licensing and things like that. But we'll get you pointed in the right direction for sure.
Awesome. My very, very good friend, Terry Law, she's an end of life doula. I mean, she's been in the healthcare field for a long time, but is doing end of life doula work now. She said, know who you are dealing with and to understand to look for the appropriate people to help when you are looking at the family home and how to plan for parents'
Yeah,
needs. Mhm.
yeah. And
Absolutely.
and the difficult part about the family home is a lot of times, especially if we're dealing with probate, well, and even trust sales for that matter, that family member is just thrust into the situation,
Mhm.
right? They're just like suddenly one day, and even if mom and dad have been on long-term care or, even on hospice for extended period or something like that, it's overwhelming. It is just overwhelming.
So they're burnt out already. And so then when you add this to the mix, I can see how people would just take the first offer, right?
Oh yeah. Oh
They're
yeah.
just done with everything and tired.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the reasons for desperation. So I'm very curious about this because I have no perspective. How
Mhm.
does an investor calculate how much to offer for your
Wow.
family?
Great question. Okay, so I'm going to give you the simple version of it. Uh, and it doesn't matter where your property is located. The calculations are generally about the same as a percentage, right? So there's a couple of values you have to recognize. Number one is called an after rehab value. So this means the house has been completely fixed up, brand new kitchen and baths, flooring, new roof, all new landscaping. I mean, it is brand new, right?
Hmm.
After rehab value. And oftentimes that is roughly, like what Zillow might report. Okay. Because they're going, hey, this is what homes in the area are selling for, which most of the homes in the area selling are relatively close to that condition. Right. But then you take your property and you go, well, again, it's all, run down. There's, two of the drawers in the kitchen are busted from 1964 and
Wood paneling on the
oh
walls.
yeah, wood paneling, vinyl, the rollout vinyl floor, of course, all the good stuff, right?
Yeah.
Um, but but what they'll do is they'll take that and they'll go, okay, so after rehab value, and I'm going to use Orange County homes as a reference because, well, it's where I live.
Mhm.
Um, and just because I like to shock people sometimes, but Orange County, the median home sale price is just a hair under $1 million. That's for an average home.
Yeah.
I know. Um, so $1 million. So they go in there and they'll look at it and they'll say, okay, now let's deduct the repair costs. Okay. And when we say deduct the repair costs, we're talking about retail costs. This is an important distinction because some cash investors, they have their own teams and it might only cost them $150,000 to do all those repairs, all the rehab, but they're going to deduct retail cost, which could be 200,000 or more, right?
Okay.
So let's say they're going to take 200,000. So now you're down to 8. Okay. And then they're going to take off their any other additional fees and holding costs and all that stuff, right? So now you're down to 750. And then they're going to take off their profit. What do they want for profit?
Mm.
Okay. I will tell you in higher end homes, higher end price homes, I should say, um, depending on the investor and whatnot, I mean, the minimum I've seen is 15%. Okay. It's more likely going to be around the 30% range. Okay.
Okay.
So now you're, you're in the $500 million house. You're now in the $500,000 range.
Like half. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. And so, when you think about it from your family's perspective, um, that's a tough pill to swallow, but like I said, they're really good at convincing you that,
it's the best option.
yeah, this
And
is
sometimes, like you've already said, sometimes it can be the appropriate option. But what you're saying is that take the time to do the due diligence. And that's what you help
absolutely
with is to, yes, maybe explore that option, but explore the other available options and weigh them, compare them, and then make an informed decision on
right.
which direction to go.
Yeah. And if somebody wants to do this on their own, they can absolutely do this on their own. But what I tell them is I say minimum get 5 different offers from 5 different people.
Okay.
And then what you do is you do a concept called round robin. Okay. And so you go to all 5 and you get the one, and that's at 550.
Mm-hmm.
So the next person shows up and they go, well, the best we can do is, the best we can do is 550. I already got an offer for 550. Okay. Well, we'll give you 575. The next one comes. Well, we got 575. Okay. Well, we'll give you 590.
Mm-hmm.
And so you kind of bump them up and then you wait, by the time you get to the last one, they're like going, okay, we'll give you 650.
Yeah.
And then what you do is you go back to the first one again and you keep running around and you keep running around and you keep going back and forth until you get to the very highest price that you can. And next thing you know, you're at 720.
Well, that's called negotiation,
That's
right?
called negotiation. But so many people are so conflict avoidant, right?
Yeah.
Family members and this is why it's so important to have a real professional stepping in and helping you with this because you're an accountant at some company and this is not what you do.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Who
And
wants to
I mean, like you said, there's also the, not wanting to deal with the conflict. And then if we're talking about these adult children of aging or the well spouse, right, who's handling this, oftentimes overwhelmed, stressed, and burnt out.
Mhm.
So it makes complete sense to me why somebody would want to outsource this to you to
Yeah,
handle it,
absolutely. Yeah.
So if the home is outdated, should it be updated before it sells? Like, is that an absolute must that it should be updated before it sells?
The answer is it depends. It depends on what the cost is to update, depends on what your mortgage is on the property, depends on
Mhm.
other financial aspects. So if you can have it updated to a point where it actually increases the value significantly above what the cost of doing the updating is,
Mhm.
then yes, absolutely, because that's just that's called leverage in a sense where
Yeah.
we put in 100, but we're getting out 175. Yes, absolutely. Okay.
Mhm.
And for the audience, a lot of them may not realize this. There are companies out there all over the country that will do these updates for you without a penny out of your pocket up front. They only get paid when the house sells and escrow
So that
closes.
was my next question for you, because
Yeah.
sometimes people find themselves in that position where they know the right thing to do to get the highest value is to update it, but they don't have that disposable or that liquid funds to be able to
Right.
do that.
Right. Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, I had a client who was, his dad passed away. He lived 8 states away. And he worked at 7-Eleven. That was his job. He was a college
Mhm.
kid, right? And there's no way
Mm,
that he could ever even think about doing something like that. But
mm.
we were able to bring somebody in to do all those repairs and bring it up, and it significantly increased the value of the property, giving that family member, somebody, uh, uh, something that they could like have a legacy and have a
Right.
significant.
Right, because otherwise, because he was a younger gentleman and didn't have that,
Yeah.
that those liquid funds, he was kind of in a bind, not wouldn't be able to do it. So clearly, wouldn't have sold for as much. And so are those companies operating all over the U.S. and do you have access to those types of people?
I do. Yeah, I do have access to those, and they're going to be more readily available in more of the major metropolitan and suburban areas. If you're kind of out a little bit farther, uh,
Hmm.
then sometimes we'll reach out to general contractors and we'll say, hey, is this something that you're willing to do? If it's a good, reputable general contractor that they've got sufficient reserve funds that they can do the work and wait for the house to sell, they'll do it. But you also have to be a little bit cautious too with this, because sometimes those general contractors, they'll say, well, it's $100,000 in repairs, but if we're financing it, we're going to charge an extra 50 grand.
And again, that's the importance of working with somebody like you, because you're taking care of that due diligence, finding the ones that are reputable, but also it sounds as though you're playing a hand in figuring out what the agreement will be.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure.
That's fantastic. Zoe seems, she says, great information. Thank you, Sarah and Anthony. Well, thank you, Zoe, so much for
Thank you,
tuning in.
Zoe.
We really appreciate your support. So I have, this is another question, Anthony. I'm learning a ton today.
Sure.
And
Happy.
so what's the difference between a wholesaler and a cash buyer? And is one better than the other?
Okay. So, um, if you see these ads that say, we'll buy your house for cash, I'm going to bet you 90%, I don't know, that might be a little aggressive. A high percentage of them are what's called wholesalers. Okay. And a wholesaler is nothing more than a middleman. Okay.
Okay.
And so let's go back to a cash buyer, just for clarification. A cash buyer, this is somebody who actually has cash in hand, or they have an appropriate line of credit
Mhm.
that they use, because nobody really uses their own cash anymore, right? They use somebody else's money, but they have that, and they are the ones actually purchasing the property.
Okay.
Okay. A wholesaler, on the other hand, what they'll do is they'll come to you and say, hey, we'll buy your house for cash. You go, great. They'll give you an offer based on kind of their calculations that we just discussed.
Mhm.
And they'll say, well, we'll give you this price. And if you agree to it, then they'll put terms in the agreement that says that they have the right to assign the contract. They have a right to replace or novate the contract. That they have a right to acquire, or add third parties to the contract, things like that, right? They do
Okay.
all kinds of weird stuff. But what they're doing is when they're doing all those calculations, they go, okay, um, in addition to that low price that we've already come up to, they're going to add another 10, 15, 20, $50,000 onto the bottom of that and take it off, because that's what they call an assignment fee.
Okay.
So now this wholesaler, and this is the term they use, they lock up the house. They lock up the deal. So you're under contract now as a seller, as a family member who's dealing with this family estate. You go, looks good, it's locked up, and now you can't go sell it to anybody else. What that wholesaler is going to do now is they're going to go out to all the cash buyers, and they're going to say, hey, I've got this property, and the price I'm offering it to you now is this.
This is
I got it for this, but I'm offering it to you for this, because now they get that assignment fee.
Okay.
So if you think about this, I want you to think, for people to think about this. This is a middleman, and there was one that I just saw that just closed, where this wholesaler, they got $75,000 for simply handing over the transaction to another seller, to another cash buyer, instead of that money going to the seller, right?
Yeah.
And so what is another form of, if you will, a middleman? It's a real estate agent. Yeah, you got to pay commissions, but real estate agents are held to ethics and, rules and guidelines and all that thing. And look, and I know there's a bazillion real estate agents. Not all of them are worth their weight in salt. I promise you that. But they do at least have that. They have to look out for the best interest, or they're supposed to look out for the best interest, as opposed to wholesalers and cash buyers. And this goes back to the big smile. They are not looking out for the seller's interest in the least.
It's to get the most money, right? I mean, this is
to get the most money. Absolutely. And they'll argue too. They'll say, like, because I get wholesaler, like, if there's wholesalers, you're going to get comments, I promise you, that from wholesalers and cash buyers and stuff who want to argue their point. Well, we're ethical and we give good deals and this and that and all that stuff. And it's like, fine. But so Sarah, if if me and my family were standing in a room, and you and your family were in the same room, and there was 5 other families standing in the same room, and you were asked the question, Sarah, whose family is more important in this whole room? Whose family is most important? What would you say?
I mean, I would have to say my family, but I also don't like the idea of stepping on other people in order to.
But the reality is, in your opinion,
you should never harm another person's family, right?
Well, no, we're not talking about harm.
Yeah,
we're not talking about harm. We're just talking about just in general.
Yeah,
you're gonna, in your mind, you're going, well, my family is most important to you,
right?
Because if you ask me the question, my answer is always going to be, my family is most important to me, and so are all those other families. And so that wholesaler or that cash buyer, they're going to argue that, hey, I've got to get the lowest price possible because my family is most important to me.
Right. Why would anybody use a wholesaler, Anthony? Because we're talking about, they buy it, the wholesaler, and then they turn around and give it to someone, a cash investor. So why would anybody use a wholesaler?
Because they don't know.
Okay.
They don't know they're using a wholesaler. Again, there are techniques that they use to come in, have the conversation, sit there and do your dishes for you, right? Do all this nice stuff for you, be your best pal and your friend. And they're giving you a contract that, when's the last time you read a real estate contract? Right? If you were handed a contract, do you say, you know what, let me look it over. Let me have my attorney look it over. Let me have another real estate professional look it over. Right? And if you do that, I can promise you they're probably going to say, well, you know what, that's fine, but I'm going to another property right now to look at that. And if I might end up buying that one instead.
I see.
No. Oh my gosh, no. Don't do that. Buy my property instead, right?
Well, my advice right now to the audience, call Anthony. Don't feel intimidated, right? Don't succumb to the pressure if you find yourself in that situation.
Yeah.
That this is really, really valuable information. I have not known any of this, and so I know it's going to be really valuable to the audience as well.
Okay.
I just lost my questions. Bear with me.
Oh, that's okay.
Bear with me
I'm gonna take
here.
a sip of water anyway, so.
Okay. Let's see, where was I? All right. So we've talked about it's not necessary to update it, but oftentimes it does make sense. And then there's resources. If you don't have the liquid funds to be able to do that, there are still resources that you can connect people with to make that happen so they get the most value upon the sale. We've discussed what's the difference between a wholesaler and just a cash investor. So family members are often thrust into a position where they have to sell the family home. And we've kind of touched on this, but I'd like you to answer it more fully. Why is this so stressful for them?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, what does that family member have to go through when they're put in this position? And again, it doesn't matter even if they've had advance notice and they knew this was coming and it's kind of already taken place. I mean, here's a great example. Me and my wife, we took care of her mother in our home, and even though we took care of her, I don't know, 10 years, something like that.
Wow.
And when she finally passed away, it was a tornado. It was just a tornado. And you think about they have to worry about, okay, selling the house, because that's what we're talking about right now is let's sell the house. Okay, great. We already know that that's stressful. They got to worry about making sure all the bills are paid. They've got to make sure that they sort through decades of clutter.
Oh,
What the heck does mom and dad still have this thing for? It's funny because my mother-in-law, bless her heart, she would keep everything that was broken.
my grandmother did the same thing. I think it's that year, but I'm sure she kept your wife's schoolwork all the way back to kindergarten too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And and that's a joy to go through that stuff and look at that stuff and have those memories and everything. But it's difficult to still go through all that. They have to manage, if it's mom and dad moving into assisted living or something like that, they have to manage the ongoing medical care. They have to worry about moving and the expenses associated with that, clearing out the property, doing estate sales, fending off all those opportunity seekers like we talked about. They have to worry about securing the property and family disputes. And let me tell you something, the stories, heartbreaking stories behind family disputes.
I was hoping you were going to bring this up.
I
was about to say we need to add family dynamics to this list.
It's, I mean, that, boy, you want to talk about being sad. I mean, I'm even getting a little emotional about it because, mom and dad passes away and we all want to think, hey, we're all just going to, we're all going to come together and we're going to, abide by whatever's in the trust or the will and just distribute things, right? But I can't tell you the number of times that I have seen the day mom or dad passed away. I'm not talking the next day. I mean, the day the front door kicked in, the house rummaged through, all the valuables stolen, and this is by family members.
Oh, trust me, Anthony. Yes, and I really, audience members, we're not exaggerating.
I can tell you 100 stories of this happening, and they go through all the valuables and they go through all the go through everything and steal everything and access the bank accounts. I had one of my step niece, I guess you could call her. Her father passed away, and again, we're in California. His house is in Alabama, I think it was. somebody who wasn't even related but knew them drove from California to Alabama, broke in the house, stole all the valuables, stole the safe, did all that stuff. They couldn't prove it, right? But they know it was them. I mean, who does that? Who does that?
I don't
But
know, but
people,
it's really
they
really
lose their minds when they think that they're going to get something out of it, some money out of it, right?
Mhm, mhm.
So, if I can give a major tip to anybody, and this goes to every single person who's listening, I don't care if you own a house, if you live in a little one bedroom, studio rental, if you have a bank account, go get a living trust.
Absolutely.
Get a living trust and do it right now. Okay. Because it'll save you a world of hurt, and you don't want to go through the probate process. The probate process is extremely damaging.
Mhm.
Uh, we haven't even touched on that. The cost associated with it. That's also something else that they have to stress. Yeah, okay, and I'm sorry, I keep going off on all these
No,
stories.
this is people need to hear this, so I'm
Yeah.
glad that you're sharing this.
So we have family members that they're going. You know what? Mom and dad never never got a living trust. They only had a will, right? And in people's minds, they think, well, there's a will. It says who gets what, right? But what they don't understand is that the will is a document that needs to be interpreted by the court. And so you end up in a courtroom, and then what ends up happening is you have the house. It's free and clear. But because of all the court fees, all the attorney fees that you have to have involved, all the other fees associated with the process and all that stuff, now you owe somebody a large chunk of money because the fees, at least here in California, are associated with the total estate.
Yeah, it's a percentage of the estate, is it not?
Of the total estate, yeah. So you could have this house, it's free and clear. You go, you know what? Thank God, mom and dad worked so hard for us to have this house that I can move into and live here, my family home I grew up in.
Mhm.
But now I owe a massive amount of money to
Mhm.
attorneys and stuff. Where's it
Mhm.
come from? Well, as they're crying because they can't keep their family home, they have to sell the family home to do this. Don't let that happen. Get a living trust,
Do
please.
proper planning, and Connect Our Elders is all about not only educating, proactively educating
Yeah,
people about care options, but also the importance of proper legal planning.
yeah,
It's
and I
a
love that.
huge part of that. So thank you for explaining that so clearly to the audience. So if someone decides to put the family home on the market and it's severely outdated or is a real fixer upper, okay, what's the best way to get the most money for the home?
Okay, so couple things. Like we talked about having cash offers, right?
Mm-hmm.
We talked about having numerous people making offers on the property, right? Get of five, a minimum of five offers. But the other thing too is if you decide to do it as a retail sale, right? One of the big mistakes that people make is, again, we talked about this, hiring an agent. It's not really suited for selling fixer uppers. Okay, we
Okay.
got to find that right person. Okay, we talked about that. But the other thing too is that, and again, you're in charge of selling your house. Even if you're from out of state or something like that, and you walk in and you go, wow, this place it's run down.
Mm-hmm.
Don't let them promote it as anything other than that. Okay, I'm going to give you an example. It's so common. I see this even in my local MLS. It says, oh, great opportunity for this, this wonderful home in this area, needs a little TLC and make it your own, right? And and the problem with that is that, when somebody looks at that MLS listing and they read that description, they go, oh, it just needs a little TLC. Most people think, okay, it's got to be cleaned up
Yeah, some
and
paint.
maybe some paint, some new flooring. We're good to go.
But then
right?
come to find out it needs a new roof.
Yeah,
Getting a shot.
exactly. And they find out they find that out. So now their expectations are here. When they get to the property, they go, "Ooh, okay." And buyer psychology, the way buyer psychology works on real estate, this is fascinating. Um, and this is a kind of a silly analogy, but if a buyer walks into a house and they see, a drippy faucet, they go, "Gosh, if the faucet's dripping, that faucet needs to be replaced, and I can't replace it with the same $75 faucet. It has to be replaced with a $400 faucet. And while the faucet's being replaced, I got to replace it with an $800 sink. And gosh, and if it's leaking, what it probably means is the whole house needs to be replumbed. That's going to be $10,000. And boy, if it needs to be replumbed, probably the valve going out to the water main is broken, and it's going to back up, and it's going to cause the local dam to collapse. And oh my God, it is go down a rabbit hole, right? There's and so when the expectation is high, and then it comes here, it actually goes even further down. Okay. However, if you promote it, if that's the kind of property you have, promote it as that. One of the greatest lines that I use in some of my MLS listings when we list properties locally is I'll say, worst house in the best neighborhood.
So being transparent is what you're saying. Completely
Absolutely.
transparent.
Because then people show up and their expectations down here, and they think the walls are caving in on itself, and the roof, is sideways, and all this stuff. And they show up, and then they go,
"Oh, it's not that bad.
This isn't so bad, honey. We need to get this." And so are the other 10 people who are looking at this opportunity. And now all the other cash buyers who are looking at this opportunity, and guess what they do? Boop, 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 boop.
That's great advice for anybody, any real estate agents listening in. I'm sure that they loved that bit of education. Okay, so all right. You say make the cash buyers compete. So we've talked about this, the round robin, making sure that you have at least 5 offers. But if they say they don't want to increase their bid, isn't that kind of scary just to let them walk away? Okay.
Yeah, good question. It's a psychology tactic, right? Mm-hmm. So it's called the takeaway close.
Okay.
So here's my offer. Here's my ridiculous offer that I'm going to make you. And if you give any resistance at all, it kind of goes back to that same thing. Well, you know what? I've got another property. That's right. I'll just go look at that one. And you as a home seller who doesn't deal with this on an ongoing basis, doesn't understand these tactics, you're like, that's my one opportunity. Right. But really what's happening here is, let's say you've got 5 offers and you start doing that round robin method that I talk about. Mm-hmm. And the person goes, nope, take it or leave it. That's what it is. Right. Again, the reaction is, oh no, we lost one. Yeah. We better take it. What they're trying to do is they're trying to steal that house from you.
And in that case, you have to say, I can't help it, but I'm picturing kids on the playground where one doesn't get his way. And it's like, I'm taking my marbles and going home. And then the other kid immediately reacts and says, no, but I'm losing my friend. Be my friend. Yeah, and you're willing to accept, maybe treatment that's not so good. So, but in this case, the reaction needs to be, that's fine. That's fine. Take your choice. Go home. I'll find another friend to play with.
Well, and then what you do too is after they've left the scene, you keep sending them the message, the text or the email or whatever that says, hey, we actually, our offer is up here now. If you want to get in, it's still there. You just keep sending it to them. And I'll tell you, because, and this is kind of funny, because most wholesalers and house flippers and cash buyers and all that stuff, if they're smart, they know their numbers. They're not going to exceed a certain number, period. But I will tell you that a lot of them, they're the same way as everybody else. They get emotionally invested, like, fine, and they'll come in. And I'm going to give you a great example. We had a property that, mom or dad passed away. Mom was moving to an assisted living facility. Mm-hmm. And, the house was in a trust. They had, a friend, actually, not a family member, but a friend handling the sale. He called one of the cash offer ads, only spoke to one person. Like I said, that's what they do. They talk to one person. That person offered him $610,000 for this house. Again, we're in Orange County, California. Offered him $610,000. Super friendly. He even told me, he goes, the guy was really nice. I feel like I need to let him buy the house. I'm like, slap. No. And so he told me, he said, I'm literally ready to sign it later today. I'm going to sign his offer unless you give me a good reason why not to. And I shared with him what we do and how we do it. Also, I said, look, give me 1 week. You give me 1 week. The end result was that we sold the house. Remember, $610,000. We ended up selling the house to another cash buyer for $865,000.
Wow.
That's $255,000 more than that original cash buyer would have let you sell your house to them.
Wow.
And so
That's phenomenal.
Yeah. Do you think mom's quality of life was significantly different because she had an additional $250,000 available for her in her last years?
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Man.
So yeah, don't let them get away with that.
That's a great success story. So I'm really interested to know this. Let's talk about this $50,000 dishwasher.
Yeah, we mentioned that. We mentioned the guy who sat there and said,
what that was. Okay.
Yeah. He sat there and did dishes for this little old lady, and it was able to get her. And in the story that he's telling, he's bragging about this on his investor network forum, where he's going, yeah, I'm sitting there and we're working and we came up to a price and everything, and she did not want to budge on the price and whatever. But I went back and I visited with her, and she was doing dishes, and I said, let me do those dishes for you. You sit down. Because she was older, using a cane and struggling to get around. And so he sat there and washed it. So I washed her dishes for her, and in that process, and she literally said, you know what, because you're so nice to me, I'm going to sell you the house for your price.
Which, if you think about a lot of these people, these older adults in this situation, it's unfortunately many are sort of isolated. They're not getting a lot of companionship, right? They can feel lonely. Yeah. So I could totally see how somebody would succumb to that, right? Like, oh, he's so nice to me, paying attention, and then feel obligated to budge on what she, on the price. Oh, that's horrible.
Yeah. Oh, it is. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I mean, and I don't blame them. I don't blame the lady for doing that. She probably the first real companionship she's had in years. But I can promise you this was a tactic that this particular buyer was using, and he was aware of what he was doing.
Yeah, no doubt.
In my book, that's manipulation, and that's stealing.
It is. It 100% is psychological manipulation. Yeah. So let's talk about, like, how do you go about getting the best cash offer? Is it everything that we've talked about right now? Get more than one, do the round robin, don't be afraid to let them walk away, or are there additional tips?
Yeah, no, but basically, I mean, that's pretty much it. Look, don't be afraid to do the extra work, right? Again, you're in your, you've got a regular 9-to-5 job, and you're doing, you're busy with your life, and you got your kids or your grandkids soccer practice that you're dealing with, and whatever. But doing a little bit of extra work, if you're going to do it on your own, get as many offers as you can and go through that process. Because if you don't, you're giving away mom and dad's equity, right? Think about it. They worked hard to leave this legacy for you. And it would be a disrespectful thing to them, I think. Mm-hmm. And also, again, to you, if you're inheriting it,
absolutely,
does it make sense to get more money?
So take the time, don't rush. Less, you
Absolutely.
had said, there's times that you need to a little bit more, but still do some
Right.
due diligence. So what about this idea, can't someone just take their attorney's recommendation for a real estate agent in this situation?
Yeah, that's great question. Uh, so attorneys hate it when I talk about this because what I tell people is, so you have to take an attorney's recommendation to a real estate agent with a very small grain of salt. Okay, and the reason I say this is because and this especially applies in probate, but if you're talking to an attorney who does probate, but they're also handling your trust, they're still recommending the same person, right? Um, excuse me. But probate attorneys get paid only when an estate is settled. Okay. And they're like everybody else. They need to pay their bills and get things going. And I'm not by any means trying to saying anything is being done unethically, but maybe after case after case after case after case after case where they've had some inexperienced real estate agent take a listing for their probate and drag it out 6 months and then mess it up in court
Mm-hmm.
and have to go another 3 months and this and that, so they couldn't settle the estate. That attorney starts getting people that they go, okay, well, I know this guy as a real estate agent can do this, I know that this guy too, but I also got these two cash buyers, right? And so what they'll do is a lot of times they'll recommend
I
you
see what you're
use those
saying.
people, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, and I can't tell you how many times I've seen this where I've looked up a probate listing and I go, oh, where's that guy from? I've never heard of him. I've never heard of that company. And I look it up and there's from 65 miles away.
Okay.
There is no way on this earth, maybe if you're in like some big, giant rural area, maybe. But if you're in a major metropolitan area, you're in surrounding suburban areas, things like that, there is no way, I don't care what anybody tells you, that anybody can effectively service that listing from 65 miles away.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason, and it might be the attorney's buddy. It could be a family member. I've seen that. Right. And that gets in a little shady area too, but again, that's not my job to judge that. I'm just saying these are the things that I've seen. And so the problem with this is that they have a mentality a lot of times of just dump the property,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? Just dump it, get rid of it, sell it as fast as you can. They come down, they put a sign in the yard, they put a lockbox on the door, and then you never hear from them again until somebody comes along and makes an offer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's not right. That's not right in my book. Same thing with the cash buyers too. If they're recommending that talk to these guys, they're cash buyers, they'll make you an offer. Well, now you're back in the same circle. And the biggest problem with that is that now you're relying on the decision or on a recommendation from somebody that you're supposed to be able to trust.
So that's what we're heading into now, right? So you've said in the past that family members, attorneys, and even industry professionals have a moral obligation to make sure the family home is sold in a way to get the maximum value, right? Like
Right.
you think it's an ethical and moral, right, obligation. So what do you mean by that?
Yeah, more. I mean, it's a moral obligation in the sense that if you've been placed in a position of trust as the executor, as an administrator, a personal representative of some kind, right? So you're probably the family member who's been assigned as that person to handle it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you have to ask yourself a question: would mom and dad be proud of you for just dumping a property? Because I get that a lot too, where the family member shows up and they go, "Oh, we just want to dump this thing." Really? Mom and dad worked for, you know, 20, 30, 40, 50 years to leave this thing to you as a part of their legacy. Okay. And maybe you don't need it. If you don't need it, take it, I guess. I don't know. But I know a lot of other people who could use it, right?
Yeah.
But but they worked hard for that. And then you show up and you go, well, gosh, this is a dump. Well, you got to consider the fact that maybe mom and dad, they couldn't afford to put that new kitchen in because you went
They
to
were paying for
college.
caregiving services.
What's that?
They were paying for caregiving services.
Well, no, even before that,
Okay.
you went to college,
Mm.
right? You
Mm-hmm.
went to a private school.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Mom and dad bought you that first car.
Mm.
Fill in the blank. Mom and dad spent money on having birthday parties for you, whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
They spent money on things for you so that that took away from their ability to maintain the property. Not to lay like guilt trip on somebody,
Right.
but then even later in life, right? Okay, fine, you've moved out, you're out of college, you're off starting your own life, right? Now they're doing the same stuff for their grandkids. And then they also go, gosh, these prescriptions are dang expensive. My copays are through the roof.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, how much to paint my house? That's nuts. Now I'm on a fixed income. I can't afford, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
you have to look at it from that perspective. Do you think mom and dad didn't want to put a new kitchen and baths in and have a pristine, gorgeous house? Of course they did. So you have a moral obligation, in my perspective, to make sure that if you're put in that position, that you take care of that. Same thing. If you're an attorney,
Mm-hmm.
man, help your client get the most that they can for their house, in whatever case it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're an industry professional and you're there and you're doing in-home care,
Mm-hmm.
you know, insist that they get a trust. Tell them, guys, you got to do it.
Oh,
And
I tell people all the time, just make this part of your assessment process. Ask,
oh,
do you have an estate plan? Do you have a trust? When's the last time it was reviewed? It doesn't have to make it systematic part of your questioning. Mm-hmm.
right, right, absolutely. Because they don't realize how, I'm going to just I'll give you an example about the trust. And this is people again think, well, I don't have a house, I don't have stocks, I don't have this and that. But there's a few key things that people don't understand with the trust. Um, Number one is, how are people going to access bank accounts and things like that when you pass away? So my wife's sister passed away, unfortunately, a few years ago, and she didn't have anything. She lived in a little one-bedroom apartment, but she had probably all of $3,000 in the bank. Okay, nothing major. It wasn't nobody was getting rich off of that.
Mm-hmm.
But because she didn't have a trust that says, when I pass away, let my sister take care of everything. It's fine. Um, it took 6 or 7 months and a whole bunch of hoops and all paperwork and constant going around to get access to $3,000 so that we
Mm.
could pay off some of her bills. It wasn't even money we got to keep because we had to pay off stuff,
Right.
and it's like, that's the importance. If you have any of that other stuff, oh my gosh, you have to do it. If you're an industry professional, like I said, I mean, you really have a moral obligation to make sure that those people know, those family members know that there's better options out there for them,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know?
I couldn't agree
'Cause
more.
if they're sitting there and they're going, gosh, if they're going, wow, our quality of life, mom and dad are gone, they're gone. But our quality of life could have been a whole lot better,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but you didn't tell me. That's
Mm-hmm.
that's something I struggle with.
Well, and you need to make your wishes known, right? Not only, the bank account information, passwords to things, but also making sure that you have a very detailed advance directive because one, people can't read your mind. And then, or if you become incapacitated too, like, how are you going to? And I think, my good friend Terry Law and I talked about this. You don't want to leave your children or whoever in your life not knowing if they're making the right decisions,
Absolutely.
or if there's multiple siblings and one thinks things should be one way and the other a different way, you create this conflict. But if you just make it very clear, right, in your planning, it can save a lot.
I'll tell you, for our trust, for my family trust, look, we have houses, we have cars, we've got bank accounts and stocks and all kinds of stuff, right? The number one reason why we got a trust, and this applies to everybody who's listening here. If you got kids, who takes care of my kids if I pass away? And there's a logical progression. Well, you think it would be this person automatically, and the courts might look at it that way. But then when we looked at who that logical progression was, we're like, the first two people were like, no way. So we laid that out in our trust. Here's who takes care of our kids, right? I mean, what's more valuable than that? Forget everything else. That's the most valuable thing.
So, moral of the story: get a trust.
Get a trust.
I think we've said that a lot, but that's how important it is, right,
Yeah.
Anthony? Is that important?
Absolutely.
So, what kind of properties are good candidates for cash offers?
Generally speaking, and this is general terms, and it is a case by case situation, but generally, if it's in disrepair, or if it is severely outdated, right? It hasn't had a new kitchen and bath in the last 30 years, or needs paint or roof and things like that. If your house is in good shape, if it's in really good shape, I mean, to the point where if you moved all your stuff out of there, could somebody live there? And which somebody could argue that you could live there with a old kitchen too, but would somebody be proud to live there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a little touch up, but other than that, it's good to go. Well, then you're definitely more of a retail. You don't even bother with a cash offer, because there's no way they're going to give you anything remotely what the house is worth.
Okay. All right. So last minute tips. This has been so informative. I want to make sure that we get through all of this. If you have time, I know
I'm good.
If you have time. So some last minute tips for the audience.
Well, I think one of the things we just hopefully beat to death and is ingrained in everybody is get a trust, obviously. But most importantly is don't be afraid to negotiate. Don't be afraid to do it. Again, if you put yourself in a family in a room with a bunch of other families, and you ask yourself whose family is most important, it's always going to be yours, right? I mean, it's not about am I doing harm to anybody else or anything. It's just to me my family is most important. And if you don't negotiate, then you're kind of saying that maybe they're not, or maybe you feel that they are, but you're just afraid to get out of a comfort zone or something like that. And that's okay. But that's where somebody like me is here to help you out. So
right, to come in there and do the vetting and the negotiating on people's behalf. So to wrap up, how do you find a good agent or multiple cash buyers?
Well, I'm just going to super simplify it and just reach out to us, theprobateagent.com. Just go there. And warning, the site is about as old as some of my clients are. So it's not a pretty fancy site. It's just, but all my contact information is there. You can go there, you can schedule a call with me, and we'll help you get connected with all the right people.
Okay.
Or at the very least, get you pointed in the right direction, because there's resources everywhere. It's just knowing where to look for those resources.
And don't, I tell people all the time, I mean, I'm not saying don't get on the internet, but you don't have to try to figure these things out for yourself, right? Because I'm sure if you're not the right fit, or if it's not the right client, then you'll point people in the right direction. All right. So does a home have to be in probate or a trust sale to contact you and to have you help, right, find the cash offers or help find the good real estate agent? Does that have to be the case for them to contact you?
No, not at all. It's like I said, the networks that I've built over the last 25 years have really we cover the whole spectrum of everything. Even here locally, probably only half of the properties that I deal with are probate or trust, right?
Okay.
So we got a lot of other referrals and things, but absolutely no. If you have a house you need to sell and you just want to talk about it, call me.
Good. And who should be calling you? Anybody? Everybody?
Yeah, anybody. Yeah, if there's a house involved, definitely give me a call. Obviously, the family members, the personal representative, executor, administrator, attorneys. You want to have access to resources too. Reach out. Let's talk. If you're an industry professional, you got questions, and if you're trying to figure out, hey, how do I have that conversation with my home seller? We know it's like my mother-in-law. My gosh, it took us ages to convince her to get a trust because she was so afraid to get a trust that because if she did, that meant it was all over.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Facing mortality.
Yeah. And so if you want to know how to have conversations with people about their housing situation, then absolutely.
All right, Anthony, how can people contact you? I know you said your contact information is on the website and people can book a call, but what's the best phone number or email address if you want to provide that?
Sure.
And I'll make sure I share it when I share the recording of this, but.
Yeah, just Anthony at theprobateagent.com.
Okay.
Is probably the best way. And then on the website, theprobateagent.com, if you click on there's a little button that down at the bottom right-hand side usually that says to schedule a call with me. And that's the best way to do it because, our schedules gets booked up too. If it's like a emergency urgent situation, the phone number is on the website, and I gotta I have to look at it because
I don't think any of us have many phone numbers memorized these days.
Yeah. 714-581-5957 is the direct number to me. But again, prefer if you just schedule the call. That way we can have allocated time and actually just
and I'll make sure I share your website when I share the recording. But I really appreciate you being my guest today. This was incredibly informative information that I've never heard, and I'm sure the audience members found it valuable too. So I appreciate you being my guest today.
Oh, my pleasure. And thank you again so much for doing what you're doing with the Empowering Agent podcast and just helping get the word out.
Thank you.
There's not enough people who hear it.
I really appreciate
it. Thanks to our listeners for listening.
Yes. So to the audience, as a reminder, Connect Our Elders and the Empowering Aging podcast is all about providing proactive education, direct to consumer, direct to the adult children that have aging loved ones, to professionals, right, in the space, whether they be healthcare or legal financial professionals. But we need to start doing a better job of proactively educating in such areas as what we're talking about today with Anthony. Also, if you're not yet aware, Connect Our Elders is offering entrepreneurial opportunities. So if you've ever found yourself wanting to own your own business and think that you want to get into the senior care space, certainly reach out to me for that. Or you can go to the website, go down at the bottom, see business opportunity. And the website is www.connectourElders.com. As always, thank you so much for being with us today for the Empowering Aging podcast. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, guys. Take care.